And we are back on the build phase. I'm Mr. Ben, and today I'm gonna talk about one main character. But before I get to that, I want to give a shout out to all my patrons for the support, and specifically those at the Pro Mat Eclipse level and above: Roland, Peter, Patrick, Justin, Jason, and Brad. We could not keep the lights on around here without support from all of our patrons, so much appreciated. If you would like to join the coolest clubhouse in Versus, patreon.com/the build phase. Okay, so way back in the day, my original vision for this show was centered around the idea of short episodes. I wanted to do like 5 to 10 minute episodes that were hyper focused on a single topic. Now, if you've been a fan of the show for a while, you can see how far I have drifted from this original vision, and I think to a large degree, doing the longer form conversations is actually positive content. I think overall that's a good thing for the direction of the show, for the health of the community. I think more versus talk is always, of course, better. So often I just don't get back to this, like, hey, let's talk about one card for 10 minutes kind of thing. So today I really wanted to do that. I had a different show lined up, some things fell through, and it doesn't matter. Point is, I was like, I want to pick a card, and I just want to talk about one card. And I thought, it would be fun to get the Discord involved. So I asked Discord, hey, name a card, and then I immediately qualified with not a basic location, because there's not a lot to say about basic location. I guess I could go through and compare all the art from all the skill location. Anyway, that's not today's topic. Today's topic, we are going to talk about Star-Lord, specifically the Kitty Pryde mantle version of Star-Lord. And I've got some decks that I've put her in and some decks that have kind of rose to notoriety within the competitive scene. And we're going to touch on all of that. But before we do, I'm just going to read the card. So we're going to start off here. This is Star-Lord. And again, this is mantle. So it's got the little stars next to Star-Lord. She is a dual affiliated main character. Now, we don't have a lot of these in the game, and the fact that she's dual affiliated is really important, but I'll get back to that in a second. Her dual affiliations are X-Men and Guardians of the Galaxy. She has range. She is a 2/5/5, and she also has AKA Shadowcat. Another place I want to put a pin. We're going to come back to that, AKA, in a second. Searching for something. This is a build phase power that she has. It costs a red. You draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards. This is one of the best powers in the entire game. It's certainly one of the best powers on a main character. There are Omegas that have coming into play effects that I don't think are as impactful as this power. And one of the reasons it's so good on this particular character is she gets to run 8 wildcard locations, as opposed to most main characters who only get 4. Before we dive too deep into that, though, I'm going to hit her experience condition, and then we'll start to unpack the card. Her level up is Galactic Guardian. Level up 2, when you play a space location, Star-Lord gains an XP. So without going any deeper, you can see how difficult her level up condition could be. If you're playing a deck where you want to see the level 2 version of Star-Lord, you have to draw space locations. And there's really only one way in the game to fish for basics, and that's Kane. So, hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll get to the specific card. Let's get her level 2 out of the way. So if we want to try to get to this level 2, we have to play our two space locations. She becomes an 8/5/5, still has range, which is really important. Being able to hide her in the back row is critical. She retains searching for something. So even at level 2, she gets this big boost to her attack. Now her defense stays relatively weak, but that's okay. She's a back row character. That's fine. Range allows her to shoot from the back row and not have to worry about losing efficacy of that big old nasty 8 attack. And even if there aren't any characters on board that you can attack in the traditional sense, you can attack in this really annoying other way, which is called maybe you can't use this power. Hold on. Intangibility. I don't know why that was so hard. I'm going to leave all that in. It's a main phase power. You play a space. So these space locations that you've been searching for, with searching for something throughout the beginning of the game, and then you had to play into your row in order to get the experience onto Star-Lord, they now have an outlet, a place where you can spend them, and that is this intangibility power. It's a main phase, pay a space, choose an enemy player to reveal their hand, and Star-Lord strikes any number of supporting characters there with total defense less than or equal to her attack, the player discards each struck character. So you could KO people before they even hit the board. This is ridiculous. This is such a ridiculous power. And it doesn't take that much to juice her attack up to be able to hit even more things. Now, it does have to happen during the main phase. So, like a for the combat plot twist can't be played on her, and then when you come out of that combat and you're back in the main phase, you don't get it, then use the benefit of that attack. So there are some plot twists that put big numbers on your attack that aren't useful for juicing her. So things like equipment, I think, factor in a little bit more. Okay, so let's talk about some of my early experiences with Star-Lord. Now, the very first deck I built with her that I really liked and talked about, I think, on the show at the time, I named after the Kevin Devine song Cotton Crush. And there was a core combo within that deck that no longer works. So this is no longer legal within the game. But since we're talking about this main character and kind of my relationship with this main character, sort of a weird way to frame that, actually, I have to touch on this particular thing. So once upon a time in Versus, whenever a character was attempting to interplay or enter any zone, if there was a rule that prevented them from entering that zone, the character would then return to wherever they came from. This matters because Star-Lord, Kitty Pryde Star-Lord, has AKA Shadowcat. And the X-Men affiliated Shadowcat card that came out in Legacy, this is a 1/3/1, totally does not matter what her stats are, but her power is Intangible Escape. It's in any combat, you pay a blue, and if an attacker or defender on your side, if an attacker or defender is on your side, put Shadowcat next to it and cancel the combat. Use this power only while Shadowcat is in your hand. The way this functionally worked before the rules change went into effect was that Shadowcat would attempt to interplay and fail and return to your hand, but the combat cancel would go through. So every blue plus one Shadowcat, and because your hand is random information, you could essentially use this power as many times as you wanted to during a turn. So it turned every wild card location in the deck into a think again, as long as you hit one Shadowcat in your hand to be able to fund this chain. Now, of course, Kitty Pryde wants to be able to draw cards. She wants to be able to use those wild card locations on searching for answers. So there is kind of a competing pressure there between whether she's digging for those space locations you need to level up or fueling this ha 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 you can't touch me combo. This was ridiculous. So now, I guess let me talk about the deck a little bit more before I get into how it functions now. So the absolute core card that is non-negotiable in a Kitty Pryde deck has to be Kane. And the way I built her in my initial Cotton Crush deck was only space locations. So I wasn't running blues, I wasn't running reds, I was only running the 8 wild cards that my main character could access and the spaces. So anytime I hit a Kane, I was absolutely guaranteed to hit a space. And I felt like that was a compromise I was willing to make in order to guarantee that I leveled up, because that's the way I wanted to play this character. So the other kind of support that I had here was other combat cancel stuff. So shock to the systems, even the odds, and then of course my ridiculous broken Shadowcat combo. And that was the way that I stuffed my opponent, stopped them from being able to do anything. And the way this deck worked is early on, I had a lot of shield characters. I've said many times how much I love the agent mechanic. You could call this scry if you come from a Magic the Gathering background. Although when I played Magic, it was before that keyword existed, and it was just all written out on the card. Draw X, put them back in anywhere. Anyway, so agent's one of my favorite mechanics. I like drawing extra cards, and more than drawing extra, well, maybe not more, but equal to drawing extra cards, I love the ability to stack my deck, and that's essentially what agent does. And with a main character like Star-Lord, you really, really, really want to be able to stack your deck. One of the issues with how I built this is these early shield characters are pretty weak. They can go down pretty quickly, but as they come into play and they do their thing, and I put Mockingbird in here too so I could mess with my opponent's deck as well. As they come down, they set up the deck the way that I want to be able to draw it. I get my level up, and then I move into sort of phase 2 of this Cotton Crush deck, which was just abusing all the power-up stuff. So I've, again, said many times how much I really like the 6-drop A-Force affiliated Loki, who whenever a character gets powered up, first time in the turn, you draw 3 cards. So the back end of my deck is Spider-Man 2099, who has built-in power-up to cancel a combat. The Loki, who lets me draw a bunch more cards to refill this extremely thirsty engine that I have. And then Shikla, which is another card that allows me to pull cards out of the KO pile. So a lot of this engine still works, even though the core combo that I kind of built the deck around, abusing the Shadowcat rules nuance, no longer works. At the very top end, based on the meta at the time, I had Gilgamesh and Dark Phoenix. Arguably, Dark Phoenix is not a good fit for this deck, but I felt like every deck had to run Dark Phoenix at the time, especially one that was trying to use a bunch of combat cancels and go later into the game. So my idea was I knock everything out of your hand and kind of reduce your ability to deploy threats, and then I can have Dark Phoenix come down and do whatever I need necessarily. Probably call keywords just to make sure I don't have keywords called back on me. So about a year later, I originally posted this deck in 2019. It was, let's see, June of 2019, and then in April of 2020, so a little less than, but about a year later, I did a remix version of this deck for the Quarantine Cup. I believe it was Quarantine Cup 2. Let me double check this. No, it was the first Quarantine Cup. I don't remember exactly what the format was, but by this point, the change had gone through where Shadowcat no longer worked in this abusive infinite way. So that card is completely gone out of the deck. I retain, as is the power up package. So essentially what I did with this second version is I retained the agent mechanics at the low end as an ability to kind of filter and find those spaces that I needed. Especially with, for whatever the format was, we weren't able to play Kane's, which makes this main character very iffy to get into at all. Or no, I guess Kane's still in there. Okay, so I did away with the power-up mechanics, and the top end of the deck now goes into things like Domino. I played Cersei simply because she has that 12 attack on turn 6. Ares, I even got Sentry in here. Not one of my favorite cards, but I've seen some wisdom in how he works, particularly if you're looking to run him straight into Dark Phoenix. You can get rid of his keyword and then just attack with him for free. So very similar strategy to kind of how the original deck worked, just minus the one really broken combo. So to put I guess, finish off the discussion of this rule, what happens now when a card attempts to enter a zone and it cannot enter the zone? I guess I should have made that explicit. The reason Cat cannot enter the zone is because of uniqueness. Typically, when you have a character that wants to enter play that has the same name as a character that's already in play, the existing character is KO'd and the new character comes into play. The reason that doesn't trigger is because that cannot happen with a main character. You cannot, for any game reason, under any circumstances, have another card with the same name as your main character enter play. I'm sure there's some kind of like edge case effect. Like I'm thinking of Alter Ego, but at that point you've changed the name of your main character. So there are probably ways that you can kind of get around this, but by core game rules, Shadowcat was not allowed to interplay because of the AKA on Star-Lord, the main character. They have now changed it so that when a card attempts to interplay and cannot, like what would happen with the Shadowcat, that card's removed from the game. It's just sent to the RFG zone. It's gone for good. You don't get it back. They further errated Shadowcat so that she has to actually interplay in order for her effect to happen. So you could run Shadowcat in this deck as like power-ups. That would be pretty bad, in my opinion. But you can no longer... It wouldn't have been so bad if you could still pay the blue, get the combat cancel, and then, okay, the Shadowcat gets removed from the game. No big deal. But they errated Shadowcat and they changed the core rules. So they essentially attacked every angle of the Cotton Crush combo that I kind of built the deck on. So this type of like mid-rangey with a big explosive top-end deck is probably not the ideal place for this main character, because especially in any format where Kane is not allowed. I think Kane is an absolutely crucial key card for her. I think Kane is almost as crucial here as he is in like a rogue deck. Or I would even argue like a Miss Marvel deck, although we've seen Miss Marvel perform very well without Kane in recent days. So let's say we don't have access to that kind of tool, but we still want to be able to use searching for answers. Pay a red, draw 2 cards, and then discard 2 could activate all kinds of fun different effects. You know, in the original draft of this, I had Shikla be able to pull some of those cards back out of the KO pile. If you've got a main character who wants to look at cards in the KO pile, or not a main character. If you have a card that triggers off looking at cards in the KO pile, there could be reasons why you would want to fill that. And Cypher, while he's sort of the typical X-Men pay yellow, dump your hand, draw cards kind of guy, Kitty Pryde has that ability to fill the KO pile built into her on a main character. So the drawing 2 cards, though, is the critical part. Obviously, pay a red, discard 2 cards would be pretty bad. What this facilitates is your ability to dig for expensive, complicated combos pretty easily and consistently get them early, because you're looking at essentially double the number of cards as your opponent. If I'm on Kitty Pryde, Star-Lord, and I pay a red on turn 1, I draw 2 cards. Then yes, I have to discard, but I'm looking at 2 more cards than I would have otherwise. You get to draw your 2 on turn 2. On my turn 2, I draw 2. Then I pay a red and I draw 2 more. So the combo where we've seen this abused the most, and this kind of splits into 2 different versions, but the key card is Maximus. So for anybody who's not familiar with Maximus, this is an Inhuman character who came out, was it crossover 1? I think he released in crossover 1. Might have been crossover 2 now. I'm actually going to look up the card. So I can... Yes, it was crossover 1. He's a 6 cost. He's a 5/5/2. None of that matters. What matters is usurp the throne. Main phase, pay 4 yellow, move Maximus next to an enemy main character and KO it. If you do, Maximus becomes the main character on that side and loses this power and then heals all wounds. So you take away your opponent's like main thing that they're trying to do, their main character, and you replace them with this 5/5/2 range guy. So there's a couple different ways we can accomplish this. One way is using Prowler, not the new awesome 1-drop draw a card Prowler, but the 3-cost Prowler who allows you to discard a card during the main phase, and Prowler gains all the powers of that card for that turn. So you can dig out these 4 yellows, and you could even potentially be running things like, I'm drawing a blank on the Spider Friends. Is it the Daily Bugle? Whatever their wild card is, doesn't matter. But you have multiple ways to activate this. So you've got 4 yellows plus whatever the 4 wild, I think it's Daily Bugle. And on turn 3, you give Prowler this power. Now, Prowler only has 1 hit point instead of 2 like Maximus does, so he's a little bit easier to hit. He has a little bit softer stats, and you give your opponent Prowler. Now, you still have to kill the Prowler. You still have to get there. So this version of the deck definitely is going to rely on having ways to get into that back row. Maybe you would even want to run like some Predator stuff to make sure you could have like a Primeval Hunter to stealth up and throw into the back row to clear something up, or potentially nuke a Nullifier. In formats where this kind of combo is legal, running Nullifier simply to be able to call Usurp is really important. That can backbreak a deck. In the Quarantine Cup 3, I think Joe actually pulled that off against Smallwood. The other version of this deck uses Pixie instead. Now, Pixie is a little bit better in my opinion, but you're a little bit more all in. If the Pixie play, so if the Prowler play fails, you can still kind of pull it out a little bit because the deck isn't so all in on the combo. You could put other things in there to have kind of a, not a great plan B, but you're not all eggs in one basket. The Pixie deck, on the other hand, really requires that you build your deck in a very narrow way. So Pixie is a 2-cost character. She's from the Air Force expansion. She's a 1/4/1. Again, none of that matters. But her power is hallucinogenic dust. Main phase, pay a blue, reveal cards from the top of your deck until you reveal a character that is not already on your side. Put that character onto your side, shuffle the rest, and critically, at the end of turn, KO that character. So if you use the Pixie Maximus combo as opposed to the Prowler Maximus combo, when you find that blue, so you need 4 yellows and a blue, and you pay the blue to Pixie, you flip cards over on the top of your deck, and you build your deck in such a way so there's no characters that can be hit that aren't Maximus. So if you're trying to run like a Primeval as a way to deal with a Nullifier, you need to make sure you already have a Primeval in play when you go to pull this off. So depending upon how much resistance your opponent's putting up, you might not be able to pull this combo off on turn 2, but you can some of the time. Like, it's a non-zero amount of the time when you can pull this off on turn 2. So you pay the blue, you flip until you find Maximus, you pay the 4 yellows to Maximus, and once he's over on the opponent's side, you say pass, Pixie's poison pill triggers, Maximus is KO'd, and you win the game off the back of this combo. And this is all funded, this is all possible through the framework of Star-Lord's searching for something power. Build phase, pay a blue, draw 2 cards, and discard 2 cards. Now, this isn't the only combo you could play, and certainly she could have a home with access to 4 or 8 wilds. She could also find things like uh, I'm drawing a blank on the gem. I think it's the power gem that gives her plus 10 attack. You know, you put that on her, you pay that green, and then you pay a space to her level 2 power, and chances are pretty good with 18 attack, you're going to knock everything out of your opponent's hand, and you can kind of win through that type of attrition. So that's one angle you can take this character. You can use this character to fish for combos, like the Prowler and Pixie Max combos I described. So overall, I really like this main character. I think she's relatively balanced. I think it probably would have been okay if at level 2 she lost searching for something. But most of the time, if you're playing the kind of deck where you're relying on searching for something to dig for combo pieces, you're probably not going to level up anyway. So allowing her to keep that on her level 2, I don't think pushes her combo potential in any particular direction. If you're going for a combo, you're probably not running the spaces to level anyway. And for the like mid-range or the control-y style of this deck where you want to fade attacks and then be able to empty the opponent's hand and kind of control them out of the game and then win on the board, having this on her level 2 I think is really important. It's probably the difference between that play style of actually having a curve working and not working is the fact that she retains it throughout the whole game. So overall, this is a main character that I like a ton. I obviously my bias is pretty out there as far as how much I like both draw effects and card selection effects, and built in to this main character, she has both. I'm also kind of a fan of chipping away at my opponent and trying to disrupt what they're trying to do, which her level 2 has the ability to do that. And while it's not my favorite style of play, I have been known to get down on a combo deck from time to time. So really, no matter what direction you take this main character, there is something there for kind of a variety of different players. Now, if you're a hardcore aggro player, this is not the character for you, probably. Although there's an argument that paying a red and getting 2 cards and maybe finding the exact team attacks and equipments you need in an aggro deck, I haven't had much success with her in that specific type of game, but as far as mid-range or control or combo, I think she can really fit the bill for all of those archetypes, and I've had a lot of fun with this main character over the years. So, all right, I think that's going to wrap up everything we have to say about Star-Lord, Kitty Pryde, main character today. Again, overall a thumbs up for this main character as somebody that I enjoy playing with. And I want to give a shout out to Larfleas64 from the Discord for giving me the idea to focus today's show on this particular character. Until next time, go win some games.